The morning rain had stopped, but the streets of downtown Chicago still glistened with puddles that reflected the gray October sky. Marcus Thompson pulled his worn baseball cap lower over his eyes as he walked slowly down Michigan Avenue. His clothes were deliberately shabby, an old jacket with holes in the elbows, faded jeans with patches, and sneakers that had seen better days. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another homeless person trying to find shelter from the autumn chill. But appearances can be deceiving. Hidden beneath those humble clothes was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the city. Marcus owned a chain of luxury hotels that stretched across 3 states, had investments in tech companies that most people only dreamed of working for, and his bank account held numbers that would make lottery winners jealous. At 35, he had built an empire from nothing, starting with a single food truck that he had saved for years to buy. However, success had come with a price. The higher Marcus climbed in the business world, the more isolated he felt. Everyone who approached him wanted something: money, partnerships, investments, or simply to be associated with his wealth. He couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him without knowing who he was or what he could do for them. The genuine human connections he craved seemed impossible to find in his polished world of boardrooms and charity galas. That's why Marcus had started these walks. Every few months he would dress down and wander through different parts of the city, observing life from a perspective that his wealth usually shielded him from. He had done this in New York, Los Angeles, and several smaller cities during his business travels. It wasn't about playing games with people's emotions or deceiving anyone maliciously. Rather, it was his way of staying connected to the reality that most people lived in, the reality he had once known intimately. Today's walk had taken him through Grant Park and then toward the River North area. He had been walking for about 2 hours, simply observing the rhythm of the city. Office workers hurried past with their coffee cups and briefcases. Tourists stopped to take photos of the architecture, and street vendors called out their offerings to anyone who would listen. Most people didn't even glance at Marcus twice, which was exactly what he had hoped for. As he turned onto a quieter side street, Marcus noticed her sitting against the brick wall of an old building. She couldn't have been more than 16 or 17, with long dark hair that needed washing and clothes that hung loosely on her small frame. A cardboard sign sat beside her with simple words written in careful handwriting. "Anything helps. God bless." A small paper cup sat in front of her with just a few coins inside. What struck Marcus most wasn't her youth or her obvious need, but the book in her hands. Despite her circumstances, she was completely absorbed in reading what appeared to be a thick novel. Her lips moved slightly as she read, and occasionally she would pause to look up at the sky with a thoughtful expression, as if pondering what she had just read. Marcus slowed his pace as he approached. He had seen many homeless individuals during his walks, and while he often felt sympathy, something about this girl was different. There was a dignity in the way she sat, a quiet intelligence in her eyes when she occasionally looked up from her book. She wasn't aggressive or desperate in her approach to potential donors. In fact, she seemed almost reluctant to make eye contact with the few people who passed by. When Marcus was about 10 feet away, the girl finally looked up from her book. Their eyes met for just a moment, and he saw something that surprised him: concern. Not the calculating look of someone sizing up a potential mark. Not the desperate plea he had seen in so many others' eyes, but genuine human concern. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't mean to bother you, but you look really tired. When was the last time you ate something?" Marcus stopped walking, genuinely taken aback. Here was someone who appeared to have nothing, asking him if he needed help. The irony wasn't lost on him. He probably had more money in his wallet than this girl had seen in months, yet she was the one expressing concern for his well-being. "I'm sorry?" Marcus said, unsure if he had heard her correctly. The girl's cheeks flushed slightly, as if she was embarrassed by her boldness. "I just noticed you've been walking for a while and you look kind of pale. I was wondering if you were hungry. I know it sounds crazy coming from me, but I have this." She reached into a small backpack beside her and pulled out a wrapped sandwich. "It's peanut butter and jelly. Someone gave it to me earlier, but I'm not really hungry right now. You can have it if you want." Marcus stared at the sandwich in her outstretched hand, completely speechless. In all his years of business dealings, charitable work, and social interactions, no one had ever offered him something so simple yet so profound. This girl, who clearly needed every bit of food she could get, was willing to give away what might be her only meal of the day to a stranger she thought might be hungrier than she was. "That's very kind of you," Marcus managed to say, his voice rougher than he intended. "But I couldn't take your food." The girl shrugged and smiled, and for a moment her whole face lit up despite the circumstances. "My grandmother always said that sharing what little you have makes it multiply somehow. Besides, I've got this book to keep me company." She held up the novel. "It's about this woman who travels around the world helping people, and every time she gives something away, something even better comes back to her. I like to think it might be true." Marcus found himself sitting down on the sidewalk beside her, something he would never have imagined doing in his expensive suits and Italian leather shoes. But in his current disguise, it felt natural. "What's the book about?" he asked. The girl's eyes immediately brightened, and she began telling him about the story with an enthusiasm that was infectious. As she spoke, Marcus realized that this chance encounter was about to change both of their lives in ways neither of them could possibly imagine. For the next hour, Marcus sat on that cold sidewalk listening to Sarah talk about her book, her dreams, and her life. That was her name, Sarah Chen, and despite her current circumstances, she possessed a wisdom and optimism that amazed him. She had been living on the streets for 3 months after aging out of the foster care system. Her last foster family had kept her until her 18th birthday, and then told her she needed to find her own way. "The hardest part isn't being hungry or cold," Sarah explained as she carefully placed her bookmark and closed the novel. "It's feeling invisible. Most people look right through you like you're not even human anymore. But I try to remember that everyone has their own struggles, you know? Maybe they're dealing with something harder than what I'm going through." Marcus was struck by her maturity and lack of bitterness. Here was someone who had every reason to be angry at the world, yet she spoke with compassion about the very people who ignored her daily. "How do you stay so positive?" he asked. Sarah picked up a small worn photograph from beside her backpack. It showed an elderly Asian woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "This is my grandmother, Lily. She raised me until I was 12 before she got sick and couldn't take care of me anymore. She used to tell me that our circumstances don't define us. Our choices do. She said that no matter how little we have, we always have something to give, even if it's just a smile or a kind word." The conversation was interrupted when a well-dressed businessman walked by, talking loudly on his phone about closing some $1 million deal. He glanced at Sarah with obvious disgust and made a comment under his breath about cleaning up the streets. Sarah's face fell slightly, but she quickly composed herself. "See what I mean about invisible?" she said quietly. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have enough money to help other people the way I wish someone would help me. I'd start with the kids in foster care who are about to age out like I did. Give them job training, maybe help them go to college." Marcus felt his chest tighten. This girl was dreaming of helping others when she couldn't even help herself. "You said you were in foster care. What happened to your parents?" Sarah's expression grew distant. "My mom died when I was 7. Cancer. She was a nurse, and she used to take me with her to volunteer at soup kitchens on weekends. She said helping others was the best medicine for any kind of pain. My dad? Well, he wasn't really in the picture. After Mom died, I went to live with my grandmother, but she was already getting sick with Alzheimer's. When she couldn't remember who I was anymore, social services took me." The story got worse. Sarah had been placed in several foster homes, some better than others. In one home, she had been treated well and even encouraged to excel in school. She had been an honor student, particularly gifted in mathematics and science, but that placement ended when the foster family moved to another state and couldn't take her with them. Her next placement had been with a family who saw foster children as a source of income rather than kids who needed love and stability. "I learned to keep my head down and focus on school," Sarah continued. "I had almost saved enough money from a part-time job to get my own apartment when I turned 18. But my last foster dad took the money. Said it was for room and board. When I complained to my caseworker, they said there was nothing they could do since I was about to age out anyway." Marcus felt a familiar anger rising in his chest, the same anger he had felt as a child when he had been powerless to change his own difficult circumstances. But he also felt something else, a deep respect for this young woman who had endured so much and still maintained her humanity. "What about school?" Marcus asked. "Did you graduate?" Sarah's face lit up again. "I did. I even got accepted to the community college with a partial scholarship. But without an address or a way to pay for the rest of the tuition and books, I couldn't start. I keep thinking maybe next semester, if I can save enough money and find a place to live." She gestured to the few coins in her cup. "It's taking longer than I hoped." Marcus looked at the meager collection of change and felt sick. This brilliant young woman was being held back from her potential by a few $100s, an amount he spent on lunch without thinking about it. But he couldn't just pull out his wallet and solve her problems, not yet. He needed to understand more about who Sarah really was before he revealed his true identity. "What would you study?" he asked. "Business administration," Sarah answered without hesitation. "I want to learn how to run a nonprofit organization properly. I've seen too many good intentions fail because people don't know how to manage money or organize programs effectively. I want to create something that actually works, something that gives kids like me a real chance." As the afternoon wore on, more people passed by their spot on the sidewalk. Marcus watched how Sarah interacted with each person. She never demanded anything, never made anyone feel guilty for not stopping. When someone did drop a coin in her cup, she always looked them in the eye and said thank you with genuine gratitude. When children walked by with their parents, she would smile and wave, often making the kids giggle even as their parents hurried them along. One moment particularly struck Marcus. A young mother with 2 small children was struggling with her grocery bags while trying to keep her toddler from running into the street. Without hesitation, Sarah jumped up and helped gather the woman's spilled groceries. The mother looked surprised but grateful, and she pressed a $5 bill into Sarah's hand. Instead of keeping it, Sarah used the money to buy a pack of crackers from a nearby vendor and gave half to an elderly homeless man who had been sitting alone across the street. "Why did you do that?" Marcus asked when she returned. Sarah shrugged. "He looked hungrier than me, and lonelier too. Sometimes the loneliness is worse than the hunger." As the sun began to set, Marcus realized he had spent the entire afternoon learning more about courage, generosity, and hope than he had in years of business school and corporate boardrooms. This young woman had nothing by conventional standards, yet she was rich in all the ways that truly mattered. She had given him more than food. She had given him a reminder of what it meant to be human. But as evening approached, Marcus faced a dilemma. He couldn't just walk away and leave Sarah on the street, but he also wasn't ready to reveal who he really was. He needed time to think, to plan how he could help her without making her feel like a charity case or destroying the genuine connection they had formed. "I should probably find somewhere to sleep," Sarah said, starting to pack up her things. "The shelters fill up fast, and if you don't get there early, you end up sleeping outside." "It's supposed to rain again tonight." Marcus felt his heart break a little. While he would be returning to his penthouse apartment with its heated floors and panoramic city views, this remarkable young woman would be fighting for a spot in an overcrowded shelter or sleeping in a doorway somewhere. "Sarah," he said carefully, "what if I told you I might know someone who could help you? Someone who's always looking for bright people to give opportunities to?" Sarah looked at him with curiosity but also wariness. "What kind of help?" "I'm not looking for a handout. I just need a fair chance to prove myself." Marcus smiled. That response told him everything he needed to know about Sarah's character. "Not a handout," he assured her. "An opportunity. But I'd need to talk to this person first. See what might be possible. Could we meet here again tomorrow?" Sarah nodded, though Marcus could see the skepticism in her eyes. She had probably heard empty promises before. "Sure, I'll be here. I don't really have anywhere else to go." As Marcus walked away that evening, his mind was racing with possibilities. He had found something precious that day. Not just a worthy person to help, but someone who had reminded him why his success mattered. For the first time in years, he felt excited about the difference his wealth could make. But he also knew he had to be careful. Sarah's pride and independence were part of what made her special, and he couldn't risk damaging that in his eagerness to help. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He paced around his luxury penthouse apartment, looking out at the city lights below while thinking about Sarah somewhere out there, probably cold and uncomfortable in whatever shelter she had managed to find. The contrast between their situations felt overwhelming. Here he was, surrounded by expensive furniture and artwork, while she owned nothing but a backpack and a worn book. He spent hours researching programs for aged-out foster youth, reading statistics that made his stomach turn. Nearly half of all foster children who aged out of the system would experience homelessness within 2 years. Only about 3% would ever earn a college degree. Many would struggle with unemployment, mental health issues, and a complete lack of family support system. Sarah was beating the odds just by surviving with her spirit intact. Marcus also researched Sarah's story to verify what she had told him. Using his business connections and resources, he was able to confirm that everything she had shared was true. Sarah Chen had indeed been an honor student, had lived with her grandmother until age 12, and had bounced between foster homes until aging out at 18. Her academic records showed someone with exceptional potential who had been let down by a system meant to protect her. By morning, Marcus had formulated a plan. It would require careful execution and absolute discretion, but he believed he could help Sarah without compromising her dignity or their newfound friendship. The key was making sure she never felt like she was receiving charity, but rather earning every opportunity that came her way. Marcus arrived at their meeting spot an hour early, wearing the same shabby clothes as the day before. He wanted to observe Sarah's morning routine, to better understand her daily reality. What he saw both impressed and saddened him. Sarah was already there, having apparently slept nearby.
She had cleaned herself up as best she could using a water bottle and some napkins,
And was reading her book while nibbling on what appeared to be a single piece of bread. When she noticed Marcus approaching, her face brightened with genuine pleasure. "You came back. I wasn't sure if you would. Most people say they'll help and then disappear." "I told you I'd be here," Marcus said, sitting down beside her. "I talked to my friend last night. He's interested in meeting you, but he has some questions first." Sarah closed her book and gave Marcus her full attention. "What kind of questions?" Marcus had prepared for this conversation carefully. He owns a company that's always looking for bright people, especially those who understand what it's like to struggle. But he's very particular about character. He's been burned before by people who seemed grateful at first but then became entitled once they got some help. This was partially true. Marcus had indeed been disappointed by several people he had tried to help over the years, people who had taken his assistance for granted or demanded more and more, without showing any initiative of their own. "So he has some tests he likes to give people," Marcus continued. "Nothing formal, just situations where he can observe how someone handles responsibility and opportunity." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. I'd probably do the same thing if I had money to help people with." "What kind of tests?" "Well, first he'd want to see how you handle a small amount of responsibility. He owns several businesses and he's always looking for people to do simple tasks. Organizing files, making phone calls, basic computer work. The pay isn't much to start with, maybe $50 a day, but it's a way to prove yourself." Sarah's eyes widened. $50 a day was more money than she typically saw in a week. "I'd be interested in that. I'm good with computers and I'm very organized. When could I start?" "That's the thing," Marcus said. "He's a bit eccentric. He likes to test people's honesty first. He'd probably give you some money up front for expenses, maybe $200, and then see what you do with it. Some people take the money and disappear. Others spend it all on themselves and make excuses. He's looking for someone who uses it wisely and accounts for every penny." Marcus watched Sarah's reaction carefully. Would she be suspicious of such an unusual arrangement? Would she be tempted by the money? Sarah frowned slightly. "That does sound odd, but I guess if he's been taken advantage of before, he has to be careful." "What would he expect me to do with the money?" "Show him that you can be trusted with resources. Maybe use some of it to improve your situation so you can do the job better. Clean clothes, a place to stay, proper meals so you have energy to work. But also show that you're thinking about others, not just yourself." He believes that truly good people can't help but share their good fortune. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus worried that he had made his fictional benefactor sound too strange. But then she nodded slowly. "I think I understand. He wants to see if I'll become selfish once I have a little money, or if I'll remember what it's like to have nothing. When would this test happen?" Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope he had prepared the night before. Inside was $200 in cash and a simple note with instructions. "Actually, he asked me to give you this today. Consider it the beginning of your test." Sarah stared at the envelope without taking it. "He doesn't even want to meet me first? What if I just run away with his money? He says anyone who would do that isn't worth his time anyway. But he's a good judge of character, and I told him about our conversation yesterday. He thinks you're worth the risk." Slowly, Sarah reached out and took the envelope. Her hands were shaking slightly as she opened it and saw the money inside. For someone who had been living on spare change, $200 must have seemed like a fortune. "What exactly does he want me to do?" she asked. Marcus handed her a piece of paper with an address written on it. "Be at this address tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. It's his office building. Ask for David Martinez at the front desk. That's his assistant. David will give you your first assignment and explain more about the job. But remember, how you use that money between now and then will determine whether you get the opportunity to continue." The address Marcus had given her was real. It was one of his office buildings, and David Martinez was indeed his assistant. Marcus had already briefed David on the situation, though he had told him only that Marcus had met a promising young woman who needed a chance. David was used to his boss's occasional charitable impulses and had agreed to help without asking too many questions. Sarah stared at the money for a long time.
"This is really happening?"
"Someone I've never met is willing to give me a chance based on what you told them about me. Some people remember what it was like to have nothing," Marcus said simply. "And some people believe in giving others the opportunities they wish they had been given." Tears started forming in Sarah's eyes, and she quickly wiped them away. "I won't let him down, or you. You both took a chance on me when you didn't have to." Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. If only she knew that the person taking a chance was sitting right beside her, and that her willingness to share her sandwich with a stranger had touched his heart more than any business deal ever could. "Just be yourself," Marcus told her. "That's all anyone can ask." As he prepared to leave, Sarah called after him. "Wait, I don't even know your name. And if this works out, I want to find you and thank you properly." Marcus paused. He had been so focused on maintaining his disguise that he hadn't thought about this moment. "Just call me Mike," he said finally. "And don't worry about thanking me. Seeing you succeed will be thanks enough." As Marcus walked away, he felt both excited and nervous about what he had set in motion. Tomorrow, Sarah would walk into his office building and begin a journey that could change her life forever. But he also knew that the young woman who had offered him her sandwich had already changed his life in ways she couldn't imagine. The real test wouldn't be whether Sarah could handle money or responsibility. The real test would be whether Marcus could find a way to reveal his true identity without losing the genuine friendship they had built. A friendship based on who they were as people rather than what they owned or needed from each other. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his office building at 7:30, 2 hours before Sarah was due to meet with David Martinez. He wanted to observe her arrival without being seen, so he positioned himself in the coffee shop across the street with a clear view of the entrance. Despite his expensive suit and perfectly groomed appearance, he felt more nervous than he had before any major business presentation. At exactly 8:45, Sarah appeared at the corner. Marcus almost didn't recognize her at first. She had used part of the money to buy clean, professional-looking clothes. A simple but neat blouse, dark pants, and comfortable shoes that looked appropriate for an office environment. Her hair was clean and pulled back professionally, and she carried a small folder in her hands. What impressed Marcus most was that she arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time sitting on a bench outside the building, reading her book and occasionally looking up at the impressive glass structure. She wasn't pacing nervously or checking her appearance constantly. Instead, she seemed calm and prepared, treating this opportunity with the seriousness it deserved. At exactly 9 o'clock, Sarah walked through the front doors of Thompson Industries. Marcus watched through the window as she approached the reception desk with confidence, spoke briefly with the receptionist, and then took a seat in the waiting area. A few minutes later, David Martinez appeared and greeted her warmly. Marcus took the elevator to his office, which had a view of the conference room where David would be conducting the interview. Through his office window, he could see Sarah sitting straight in her chair, hands folded in her lap, giving David her complete attention. Even from a distance, her professional demeanor was evident. David had been instructed to offer Sarah a part-time position organizing files and doing basic data entry for one of Marcus's smaller businesses. The work was legitimate and necessary, though Marcus had deliberately chosen tasks that wouldn't require extensive training. The real purpose was to give Sarah a steady income and a chance to prove herself in a professional environment. After about 30 minutes, David appeared at Marcus's office door. She's remarkable, he said without preamble. In 30 years of interviewing people, I've rarely met someone so prepared and thoughtful. She brought references from her high school teachers, samples of her work, and a detailed budget showing exactly how she spent the money you gave her. Marcus leaned forward with interest. What did she spend it on? David smiled and consulted his notes. $40 on professional clothes from a thrift store. $20 on a basic cell phone so employers could reach her. $30 on a small apartment deposit. Apparently she found someone willing to rent her a tiny room by the week. $15 on personal hygiene items and basic makeup for interviews. $25 on a bus pass for transportation. $30 on groceries. She calculated that would feed her for 2 weeks if she was careful. Marcus was impressed but not surprised. That's only $160. What about the other $40? That's the part that really got to me, David said. She gave $10 to an elderly homeless woman she met at the shelter. She bought school supplies for a foster family she knew was struggling to provide for 3 kids, and she used the remaining $20 to buy ingredients to make sandwiches, which she distributed to other homeless people yesterday evening. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Even when given more money than she had seen in months, Sarah's first instinct had been to share it with others who needed help. What did you tell her about the job? Exactly what you instructed. Part-time work, $15 an hour, flexible schedule to accommodate her school plans. She starts Monday morning. But Marcus, I have to ask, what's really going on here? This isn't like your usual charitable donations. Marcus had known this question would come. David had been his assistant for 8 years and knew him well enough to recognize when something unusual was happening. Let's just say I met someone who reminded me why I started this company in the first place. Keep an eye on her progress and let me know if she needs anything. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus found himself checking on Sarah's progress daily. David's reports were consistently positive. Sarah arrived early every day, completed her assignments efficiently, and often stayed late to organize additional files that weren't strictly part of her job duties. She was polite to everyone in the office, from the cleaning crew to the senior executives, and several people had commented on her positive attitude and strong work ethic. But Marcus was most interested in what Sarah did outside of work. Through discreet observation and David's reports, he learned that she had used her first paycheck wisely. She had secured a small studio apartment in a safe but modest neighborhood, enrolled in evening classes at the community college, and was slowly building a stable life for herself. More importantly, she had started what she called her Pay It Forward fund. Every week she set aside a small portion of her earnings to help other aged-out foster youth. She had connected with a local nonprofit organization and was volunteering on weekends to mentor teenagers who were preparing to leave the foster care system. Marcus was particularly moved when David told him about Sarah's weekend project. She had organized a group of college students to teach basic life skills to foster youth, things like how to open a bank account, how to write a resume, how to budget money, and how to find affordable housing. These were skills that most young people learned from their families, but foster children often aged out of the system without anyone to teach them these crucial lessons. She's turning into quite a leader, David observed during one of their weekly check-ins. The nonprofit organization asked her to join their board of directors. At 19 years old, they said they've never seen someone so young with such a clear vision for systemic change. Marcus felt proud of Sarah's accomplishments, but he also felt increasingly conflicted about maintaining his deception. Every day that passed made it harder to imagine revealing his true identity without feeling like he had been dishonest with her. Yet he also knew that their friendship, which had continued through occasional chance encounters near her old spot on the street, was one of the most genuine relationships he had ever experienced. The situation came to a head on a Friday afternoon when David appeared at Marcus's office door with an unusual expression on his face. "We have a problem," he said. "Sarah has figured out that you're involved in her situation." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean? How?" "She's been doing research on the company, trying to learn more about the business so she could do her job better." "She's smart, Marcus. Really smart." She started noticing things, the way certain decisions got made unusually quickly, the fact that her position seemed to be created specifically for her, the timing of everything. This morning she asked me directly if there was something she should know about who was really behind her opportunity. Marcus sank into his chair. "What did you tell her?" I told her she'd have to ask you herself, and then I told her who you really are. For a moment, Marcus felt panic. Would Sarah feel deceived? Would she think he had been playing some kind of cruel game with her emotions? Would she quit the job out of pride or embarrassment? How did she react? David smiled. She asked if she could schedule a meeting with you. She said she had some things she wanted to discuss with the person who had given her a chance when no one else would. She also said to tell you that Mike was welcome to attend the meeting too if he was available. Despite his anxiety, Marcus couldn't help but smile at that. Even now, Sarah was showing both wisdom and humor in how she handled the situation. She had figured out his deception but wasn't angry about it. Instead, she wanted to address it directly and honestly. Schedule the meeting for Monday morning, Marcus told David. And David, thank you for everything you've done to help with this situation. I know it's been unusual. It's been a privilege, David replied. That young woman is going to change the world someday. I'm glad we got to be part of giving her the foundation she needed to do it. As Marcus prepared to finally reveal his true identity to Sarah, he reflected on how much his life had changed since that rainy afternoon, when a homeless girl had offered him her sandwich. He had started that walk feeling isolated and disconnected from genuine human emotion. Now he was about to have the most important conversation of his personal life with someone who had taught him more about generosity and character than all his business mentors combined. The question was whether their friendship could survive the revelation that he had been lying about who he was, even if his intentions had been good. Marcus hoped that the young woman who had seen past his shabby clothes to the human being underneath would also be able to see past his wealth to the man who had been genuinely touched by her kindness. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel sharper and more significant. Marcus had barely slept over the weekend, rehearsing various ways to explain his deception to Sarah. He had considered everything from a simple apology to a detailed explanation of his motivations, but nothing felt adequate for the conversation he was about to have. At precisely 9 o'clock, David escorted Sarah into Marcus's corner office. She was wearing one of her new professional outfits, and her confidence had grown noticeably over the past 2 weeks. But what struck Marcus most was the expression in her eyes. Not anger or hurt, but curiosity and something that looked almost like amusement. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," Sarah said formally, extending her hand for a professional handshake. Or should I say, "Good morning, Mike?" Marcus stood and accepted her handshake, feeling awkward in a way that was completely foreign to him. In boardrooms and business negotiations, he was always composed and in control. But facing this young woman whom he had genuinely deceived, even with good intentions, made him feel more vulnerable than any hostile takeover attempt ever had. "Please sit down," Marcus said, gesturing to the comfortable chairs in his office's informal meeting area, rather than the imposing desk setup. "And please call me Marcus. I think we've moved past formalities, don't you?" Sarah took a seat and placed a folder on the small table between them. "I hope you don't mind, but I've prepared for this meeting. I've been doing quite a bit of research since David confirmed what I had already suspected." Marcus felt his anxiety increase. "What kind of research?" Sarah opened her folder and pulled out several printed articles and documents. "Well, first I researched Thompson Industries and its founder. Very impressive, by the way. Starting with a single food truck and building a multi-million-dollar hospitality empire by age 35. The business magazines all describe you as brilliant but reclusive, someone who avoids publicity and rarely gives interviews." She paused and looked directly at him. "But what interested me more were the articles about your charitable work. The scholarship fund for disadvantaged youth, the job training programs for formerly homeless individuals, the mentorship initiatives for aged-out foster children. It seems like you've been quietly helping people like me for years." Marcus was surprised by the direction the conversation was taking. He had expected anger or accusations, not a recitation of his philanthropic activities. "Sarah, I need to explain why I didn't tell you who I was from the beginning." Sarah held up a hand to stop him. "Before you do that, I have something I need to tell you." "I knew. You knew what?" "I knew you weren't really homeless." "Not that first day, but pretty soon after." Sarah's expression was gentle but knowing. "Marcus, I've been living on the streets for months. You learn to recognize people pretty quickly when your safety depends on it. Your clothes were too clean, even the shabby ones. Your teeth were too straight. Your hands were too soft. And most importantly, you didn't have the look." Marcus was confused. "What look?" "The look that comes from genuine desperation. The constant awareness of where you're going to sleep, where your next meal is coming from, whether you're safe. People who've really been homeless long term, they carry that tension in their shoulders, their eyes. You were relaxed in a way that only comes from having security. Marcus felt simultaneously embarrassed and amazed. If you knew I wasn't homeless, why did you offer me your sandwich? Why did you spend all that time talking to me? Sarah's smile was warm and understanding. Because you looked lonely. And loneliness is something I recognize whether someone's wearing expensive suits or living under a bridge. You sat down on that sidewalk and listened to me talk about my dreams like they actually mattered. Do you know how long it had been since someone had done that? The simple honesty of her response hit Marcus harder than any business criticism ever had. So you weren't angry when you realized I had been lying about who I was? I was hurt at first, Sarah admitted. Not because you had money, but because I thought maybe our friendship wasn't real. That maybe you were just some wealthy person playing games with a homeless girl for entertainment? Marcus felt his heart sink. Sarah, I swear that's not what this was about. I know that now, she said quickly. That's why I did more research. I found articles about your background, Marcus. You grew up in foster care too. Marcus nodded slowly. He rarely talked about his childhood, even with close business associates. From age 8 to 18, my parents died in a car accident, and I had no relatives willing to take me in. The articles said you aged out of the system with nothing, just like me, that you slept in your car while working 3 jobs to save money for your first food truck, that you still volunteer with organizations that help foster youth, but you do it anonymously because you don't want the publicity. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. So when I put it all together, a successful businessman who grew up in foster care, walking around in disguise and sitting on sidewalks talking to homeless people, I realized you weren't playing games. You were trying to stay connected to where you came from, and when you met me, you saw an opportunity to help someone the way you wish someone had helped you. Marcus was amazed by her insight. You figured all that out from newspaper articles? And from knowing you, Sarah said simply. Mike might have been wearing shabby clothes, but his character was the same as Marcus Thompson's. The way you listened without judging, the way you treated me like a person, instead of a problem to be solved, the way you set up this job opportunity to preserve my dignity instead of just handing me money. That's not the behavior of someone playing games. That's the behavior of someone who understands what it's like to need help and wants to provide it the right way. Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he had been carrying. So you're not angry about the deception? I'm grateful for it, Sarah said firmly. If you had walked up to me wearing an expensive suit and introduced yourself as a millionaire philanthropist, I would have been intimidated and suspicious. I might not have been able to relax enough to have a real conversation with you, and you wouldn't have gotten to know the real me. You would have seen the version of me that was trying to impress a wealthy benefactor. She picked up another document from her folder. Which brings me to why I really wanted this meeting. I have a proposal for you. Marcus raised his eyebrows. A proposal? Sarah's expression became more serious and businesslike. Over the past 2 weeks, I've been thinking a lot about the conversation we had that first day. About how I wished I had enough money to help other aged-out foster youth. Well, now I have a steady income and a clear understanding of what these kids need most. I want to start a nonprofit organization, and I want Thompson Industries to be a founding partner. Marcus was intrigued. Tell me more. Sarah opened to a detailed business plan she had prepared. It would be called Second Chances Foundation. The mission would be to provide comprehensive support to foster youth, transitioning to independence. Not just housing or job training, but a complete support system. Life skills education, mentorship, educational scholarships, career development, and most importantly, a network of people who care about their success. As Sarah outlined her vision, Marcus found himself becoming increasingly excited. Her plan was thorough, realistic, and addressed gaps in existing services that she had identified through personal experience and research. She had clearly spent considerable time thinking through the logistics, funding requirements, and potential challenges. What role would you want Thompson Industries to play? Marcus asked. I want you to be more than just a donor, Sarah said. I want you to be a strategic partner. Your business expertise, your network of contacts, your understanding of how to scale operations efficiently, those are resources that could make the difference between this being a small local program and something that could help foster youth across the country. Marcus was impressed. by her vision and ambition, but also by her strategic thinking. "And what would you bring to this partnership?" Sarah's smile was confident but not arrogant. "Authenticity. These kids will trust me because I've been where they are. I understand their fears, their challenges, and their potential, in ways that someone who hasn't lived through the foster care system simply can't. I also bring passion and commitment that you can't buy or train." She paused and met his eyes directly. "But most importantly, I bring the same thing I brought to that sidewalk 2 weeks ago. The belief that everyone deserves a chance, and that sometimes the best help comes from someone who's been exactly where you are." Marcus realized that the young woman sitting across from him had just presented him with the most compelling business proposal he had heard in years. More than that, she had offered him a chance to be part of something that could make a real difference in the lives of thousands of young people who needed exactly the kind of opportunity she had been given. "Sarah," he said slowly, "I think we should schedule a longer meeting to discuss this properly. And I think we should invite David and some of my other staff to hear your presentation. Because if you're serious about this, I want to give it the full consideration it deserves. A chance, and that sometimes the best help comes from someone who's been exactly where you are." Marcus realized that the young woman sitting across from him had just presented him with the most compelling business proposal he had heard in years. More than that, she had offered him a chance to be part of something that could make a real difference in the lives of thousands of young people who needed exactly the kind of opportunity she had been given. "Sarah," he said slowly, "I think we should schedule a longer meeting to discuss this properly. And I think we should invite David and some of my other staff to hear your presentation. Because if you're serious about this, I want to give it the full consideration it deserves." Sarah's face lit up with excitement, but she maintained her professional composure. "I'm very serious about this, Marcus. This isn't just a dream anymore, it's my life's work." As Marcus looked at the determined young woman across from him, he realized that their chance meeting on that rainy street had been the beginning of something much larger than either of them had imagined. Sarah had not only found her second chance, she was determined to create second chances for countless others. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the main conference room of Thompson Industries, watching Sarah address a room full of potential donors, government officials, and child welfare advocates. She wore a professional Navy suit that she had bought with her own money, and spoke with the confidence of someone who had found her true calling in life. Second chances. Foundation has successfully placed 37 aged-out foster youth in stable housing and employment in our first 6 months of operation, Sarah was saying, clicking to the next slide of her presentation. "More importantly, we've created a support network that ensures these young people aren't facing adulthood alone anymore." Marcus felt a deep sense of pride as he watched Sarah command the room. The transformation from the scared girl he had met on the sidewalk was remarkable, but what impressed him most was that her core character hadn't changed at all. She was still the same person who had offered her sandwich to a stranger, still driven by the same desire to help others that had motivated her even when she had nothing. The Second Chances Foundation had exceeded everyone's expectations. What had started as Sarah's passionate proposal had grown into a comprehensive program that was already being studied by other cities as a model for supporting aged-out foster youth. Thompson Industries had provided the initial funding and business infrastructure, but Sarah had attracted additional grants and donations by presenting a compelling case for investing in these young people's potential. The program's success came from its holistic approach. Rather than just providing temporary assistance, Second Chances created lasting support systems. Each young person was paired with a mentor, received life skills training, had access to educational scholarships, and most importantly, became part of a community of people who cared about their success. Sarah had also insisted on hiring other aged-out foster youth as staff members whenever possible. "Nobody understands the challenges better than someone who's lived through them," she had argued, and the results proved her right. The program's success rate was significantly higher than traditional transitional housing programs, largely because the young people felt understood and supported rather than judged or managed. As Sarah concluded her presentation to enthusiastic applause, Marcus reflected on how much his own life had changed as well. Working with Sarah on the foundation had reminded him why he had started his business in the first place, not just to make money, but to create opportunities and solve problems. He had begun spending more time on philanthropic projects and less time on expanding his commercial empire. After the presentation, Marcus found Sarah on the building's rooftop garden, looking out over the city skyline. She had loosened her professional demeanor and was holding the same worn book she had been reading that first day they met. "Still carrying that novel around?" Marcus asked, joining her at the railing. Sarah smiled and held up the book. "It's my reminder of where I came from and how much is possible when someone believes in you. Plus, I never did finish it. I keep getting too busy with real life to read about fictional adventures." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the afternoon sun reflect off the windows of the surrounding buildings. In the distance, Marcus could see the street corner where they had first met, now several blocks away but still visible from their vantage point. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked. Sarah considered the question seriously before answering. "About which part? Meeting you, accepting your help, or starting the foundation? Any of it. All of it. The only thing I regret is that it took me so long to realize what I was capable of," Sarah said. "I spent years thinking that my circumstances defined my possibilities. Meeting you taught me that circumstances are just starting points, not destinations." Marcus nodded. "I learned something too. I had forgotten that wealth is only meaningful when it's used to create opportunities for others. You reminded me that success isn't about what you accumulate. It's about what you enable other people to achieve." Sarah turned to face him with a mischievous expression. "Speaking of which, I have some news that might interest you. I got accepted to business school." Marcus felt genuinely surprised and pleased. "That's wonderful." "Which school?" "Northwestern. Full scholarship, plus a graduate assistantship that will let me keep running the foundation while I study. I want to learn everything I can about organizational management and social entrepreneurship, so I can scale this program nationally." Marcus was amazed but not surprised by Sarah's ambition and initiative. "When do you start?" "Fall semester. But I've been thinking about our partnership and I have another proposal for you." Marcus laughed. "Should I be worried?" "Your last proposal changed my entire life. This one might change it even more," Sarah said with a grin. "I want you to come teach a guest lecture series for my organizational management class. Share your experience about building a business from nothing and scaling it successfully." Marcus raised his eyebrows. "You want me to teach college students?" "I want you to teach future social entrepreneurs. Show them that business principles can be applied to social causes, that you can be both profitable and purposeful. Most importantly, I want them to hear from someone who understands that the most important business skill is the ability to see potential in people that others might overlook." As Marcus considered her request, he realized that Sarah was offering him something he hadn't expected, a chance to formalize his role as a mentor and teacher. For years, he had been successful in business but had felt isolated from meaningful human connection. Through their partnership on the foundation, he had discovered that his greatest satisfaction came not from closing deals, but from opening doors for others. "I'd be honored to do that," Marcus said, "but I have a condition." "What's that?" "I want to audit your classes too. It's been 15 years since I was in school, and I think I could learn a lot about the latest thinking on social entrepreneurship and organizational development." Sarah's smile was brilliant. "It's a deal, though I should warn you that the professor requires a lot of participation in class discussions. You won't be able to sit in the back and observe quietly." "I think I can handle that," Marcus said. "After all, some of my most important learning has happened in unexpected places." As they prepared to head back downstairs, Sarah paused and looked at Marcus with an expression of genuine gratitude. "Marcus, I know I've thanked you before, but I want you to understand something. That day on the sidewalk when I offered you my sandwich, I wasn't just trying to help a hungry stranger. I was trying to hold on to my humanity in a situation that could have made me bitter and hopeless." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "When you accepted my offer and sat down to talk with me, you gave me something more valuable than money or a job. You gave me proof that I was still a person worth knowing, worth listening to, worth caring about. That's what saved me, even before you revealed who you really were." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Sarah, you saved me too. I had everything I thought I wanted, but I was completely disconnected from what actually mattered. You reminded me that real success isn't about what you achieve for yourself. It's about what you make possible for others." As they walked back toward the elevator, Marcus thought about the chain of events that had brought them to this point. A chance encounter on a rainy street, a simple act of kindness from someone who had every reason to be bitter, and a conversation that had revealed the character and potential that circumstances had tried to hide. The Second Chances Foundation would continue to grow and help thousands of young people transition successfully from foster care to independence. Sarah would complete her business degree and probably go on to create even larger programs for social change. Marcus would continue to build his business empire, but with a renewed focus on creating opportunities for others rather than just accumulating wealth for himself. But more importantly, they had both discovered that the most meaningful success comes from recognizing the potential in others and having the courage to invest in it, even when that potential is hidden beneath difficult circumstances. Sometimes the most important question isn't whether someone is hungry for food, but whether they're hungry for a chance to prove what they're capable of achieving. As the elevator doors closed and they descended back toward the bustling activity of the foundation offices, Marcus reflected on how a single moment of genuine human kindness had changed both of their lives forever. The young woman who had asked if he was hungry had been offering much more than a sandwich. She had been offering hope, dignity, and the belief that everyone deserves to be treated with compassion, regardless of their circumstances. And in accepting that offer, Marcus had discovered that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or assets, but in the positive impact you have on other people's lives and the legacy of opportunity you create for future generations. The beggar girl who had changed his life was now changing the world, one second chance at a time.